we live?
You are live now. Yes, thank you.
Perfect, thank you. So we're moving to the Planning and Economic Development Committee agenda. Delegations. There are no registered delegations this evening for the Planning and Economic Development Committee agenda. 6.2 consent agenda. We are now considering item 6.2, the consent agenda, inclusive of item 6.2.1, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications, the Garden Suite update report, PD-53-21. Would any member of council like to remove an item from the consent agenda to discuss? Councillor Rajema, which item? Well, the Garden Suite update?
Yes, I do have a question, Mr. Chair.
Okay, this item will now be considered. Councillor Rajema, please go ahead.
Okay, so my question is about so I think our new zoning bylaw that's in draft form right now will allow secondary suites in separate structures other than the main building. So what will be the more onerous and expensive process? The process to, under our new zoning bylaw, establish a secondary suite in a separate structure, or the process to establish a garden suite under these amendments? And the reason I'm asking is because if one why would someone go through the garden suite process to end up with a temporary use when they could establish a secondary suite, which would be a permanent use? So I'm wondering about the balance between those two options and how it'll be under a new zoning bylaw.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's a good question, Councillor. So it would be more onerous to go through the garden suite route for sure, because with the secondary suites, which are or the accessory dwelling units, which would be a more permanent use, we're trying to open up a little bit more flexibility in accordance with provincial direction. So we're trying to make that process easier. Mm-hmm. But the garden suite, where you actually have to build another, I mean, we're requiring it now to be portable and prefab in nature, but you would actually have to have another structure on the property, whereas with an accessory dwelling unit in an accessory structure, you're allowed a certain accessory structure like a barn or a garage or something like that. And if you have a dwelling unit on top, you're not really increasing the footprint because you're including another dwelling use over top of a use that's permitted anyway, right?
So it's over an it would be allowed to be incorporated within an existing accessory structure. Is that what our zoning bylaw is proposing?
It would, but it would also allow it in a new accessory structure. But that accessory structure can't be. It would need to be kind of secondary to the purpose of that structure, especially in an agricultural area. So you wouldn't just be able to build another dwelling unit. It would have to be like some type of agricultural building that incorporates some type of accessory dwelling unit above. But it would be difficult in most cases, especially in our rural areas, just because there's building code items that would need to be addressed as well to make that into an accessory dwelling unit. So there would be a little bit more to go through there, but the process from a planning point of view would be easier because they'd be building an accessory agricultural building, and then if possible to incorporate above, they could look at an accessory dwelling unit above.
So having said all that, in your opinion, is the balance between these two proposed policies, not policies, but is the balance between the garden suite policy and what our zoning, how our zoning will address secondary units, does it make sense?
To you, Mr. Chair, I think it does. Absolutely. These are both kind of different tools to provide an alternate housing option. So it provides a little bit of more of an array of choices, but I think the balance is still there, especially from when I look at the rural area specifically from an agricultural impact standpoint.
Okay, and I do have one more question, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So the other question I have is, I mean, we definitely want to increase housing options, and we want to put policies in place and allow to keep families together. And as chair of the Housing and Homelessness Community Partnership Advisory Committee, I recognize this need and I wholly support anything that we can put in place to assist in that regard. I do have a question though about the future of the lot upon which the garden suite is established. So 20 years from now, I mean, you know, I don't know where any of us is going to be, or, you know, staff, everything changes, things change, a lot changes in 20 years. And while we don't want to make this onerous on people, do other municipalities in your review, or have we considered requiring that encumbrance be registered untitled to prevent severance of the garden suite in the future when there's a new council and new staff and new people? And how do we make sure there's a check and balance in there so that somebody proposes to sever that piece off? You know, where is the heads up?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So there's a couple of things that go with that. If the garden suite's proposed in, you know, for the most part in a lot of our rural areas, severances are pretty limited as to where they can occur and how. So there's a lot of stringent guidelines that would probably prohibit severances at all in perpetuity anyway. But we also have temporary use agreements as well that get registered on title. And we can also include something to that effect in those as well.
So right now we're not proposing to register temporary use agreement on title, but that's something that we could consider.
No, we through you, Mr. Chair, we do already have temporary use agreements that go along with these that are required to be registered. Okay. That's something we do right now. Mm-hmm.
So that would be a heads up.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Bruder. A couple questions. First one, and I know that this came up at one of the previous garden suite applications that came through, is the interpretation, and again, I also don't like to use interpretation, but interpretation of the word mobile or portable. Are we going to be, I don't see it in this, but are we going to be more steadfast in that interpretation that, for instance, a garden suite built on a foundation is not portable and does not meet the requirements of mobile?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, that is the intent, Councillor. We've actually strengthened the language a little bit more to try to take some of that, I guess, call it vagueness or flexibility or gray area out of it. Now we're using shall when we talk about modular or portable. It's going to be a little, like you say, a little bit more steadfast in terms of that's what it needs to be. We explicitly now identify that there is no basement or garage that can be included in these. So we're trying to be, you know, a little bit more stringent where we're still providing opportunities for this form of housing, but being a little more specific. And it also helps a little bit more when we get to enforcing the temporary use piece, because they can be more easily removed and we don't have to worry instead about a potential change of use down the road. So that's kind of the direction we've been going.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bruder. Through you, Mr. Chair, it was actually a good segue. My question then goes to, as we start approaching that 20-year timeline, if we're getting to year 19 or 18, what is the notification process to the owners to say that their 20-year term is coming due and they either need to make alternative arrangements for accommodation or whatever next steps there might be required?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is something we've been kind of continually working on, because admittingly, we haven't had too many of these yet that have been around for 20 years. So it's one of those things where we haven't gotten there yet. But I think, you know, one of the things that always was intended was this deposit that's required that goes along with this temporary use agreement. If they want it back, they should be coming to us and you know, dealing with that temporary use and either, well, how it previously was, converting it to a permitted use or removing the use altogether from the property. So that deposit is kind of intended as an incentive, but as part of our review, we're looking at ways internally where we can implement a better tracking system, and then, you know, potential triggers in terms of notification that needs to go out. So that is something we're continuing dialogue on, but I don't have a specific system for that yet.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burger. The reason I asked, Councilor Njemba did mention that this is likely to cascade over multiple levels of staff, directors of planning, councilors, mayor, everybody. I just hope that at some point we're going to have something in place for the next generations of Town of Lincoln staffers are keeping their eye on this, so we don't have to have very retired councilors coming knocking on doors, reminding them that there's dates coming up that they should be aware of. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good points. Councillor Timmers.
Thank you very much. So I was, I don't know where to start with this one. So I read in the new policy that was written that it's 20 years or until co-living is no longer required, which to me makes a lot of sense. You know, if someone's been in there for 20 years and they're still healthy, they're still able to live there, where are they going to go? So I think we need to look at that 20 years or until co-living is no longer needed by the people who originally were living in there and are still living in there. The other thing I find is I was hoping to see that the application would be a little more simplified. You know, we do have other temporary use applications within the town for different types of things. I remember temporary use for hoop houses. And, you know, they had to keep coming back every so many years to ask, can we do it for 3 more years or 3 more years? So I really feel that this is very onerous and it should be simplified. We need to be looking at housing, all kinds of housing. We need to look at succession planning for people who own farmland, and keeping people on the land is how you preserve farmland. You know, having the next generation who wants to take over and work the farm. You know, there's only so many options if you reach a point in your life where you want to retire that you don't want to leave the farm. Anyway, so the other thing that I find is a little bit excessive is the cost and the $5,000 deposit. I don't think it's necessary whatsoever. I think the $2,500 temporary use agreement that is right on your title is sufficient. You know, if they don't remove it, so the fees or whatever attached to that would just be applied to their property taxes. Just like any other fees for other infractions across the town, that the town incurs expenses, they apply it to the property taxes of the owner. So that's one of my points I would like to see change. And the last piece is around repurposing. So if the garden suite is built in an agricultural design purposely to be repurposed at the end of its use to be a bed and breakfast, a winery, a market that is allowed on greenbelt agricultural land, what happens to the $5,000 when that building is repurposed? That's what I would like to know.
Is it, so that's you have a specific question there.
I do, that was my question. What happens? I wanted to state the areas that I was not happy with and was looking for a change. And I would like to know if the building is repurposed.
All noted. Yep. Mr. Bruder.
$5,000 that the town's sitting on for 20 years.
Through you, Mr. Chair, you know, if currently the way it stands in our existing framework, if the building's repurposed, then, you know, and it's repurposed into a permitted use, they go through a change of use permit, then we would return the deposit because then it becomes a permitted use. But moving forward, I feel it important to note that with some of the changes that we've got in the draft provisions to date, the updated provisions, because we are requiring the garden suite to now be portable and modular, as I mentioned before, and being a little more stringent with that, it probably wouldn't be possible to repurpose that into another use. Really, the intention then is to remove it after the end of the 20-year period. And again, this is aligning a little bit more into what some of the Planning Act verbiage is around garden suites specifically. That same thing that speaks to the 20-year horizon. In terms of some of the councillors' comments around, Councillor Timmers, your comments around cost, that is something the staff agree with too. You know, we've got right now there's the application fee for the temporary use zoning amendment, then there's the fee for the agreement, then there's the deposit. But really, if you look at something called like a normal site plan, we don't charge, like the cost of the developing the agreement is rolled into the application cost. There's really not that additional overage needed. So that's something we'd be looking at here as well for an offset to streamline a little bit and maybe bring the cost down slightly. So we're trying to work at it from both ends a little bit.
I think that would be great. And also we have to remember the cost, the region costs as well, and BCA costs as well. So it's excessive in my opinion. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Timmers. Councillor Brunei.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair McCulloch. And I appreciate the planning department's work on this. You know, just to go back in time, you know, I completely support the fact that it is our responsibility to make sure that we provide a full gamut of housing stock for all our residents in all of Lincoln. I also want to be on record of saying that, you know, it's very important that we protect our farmland. And if this is something that we can do to keep families on that land, I think that is our responsibility, and we need to look at it through that lens as well. That said, I've never been against any application per se, but I felt that we had a wave of applications coming at us, and I felt it was very responsible of us to make sure that, as some of the other councillors have already alluded to, that we define and make sure we have a clear understanding of definitions when it comes to portable, mobile, the size, the height, the setbacks. So with all that said, Chair, through you, I'm wondering if Mr. Bruder, and I realize this is a draft form, and I appreciate everything that's been done to bring us to this draft amendment. But through you, Chair, with these changes here, how many of the garden suites that are already in place, that have already been approved, with these amended changes, still would have been able to proceed at the time if these draft amendments would have been placed at the time those applications? And I don't know if you're in a position to answer that, but I just thought it was, you know, the process we're going through, I think was needed. Some would argue that, but I'm just wondering if you could maybe comment on that specific question.
Might be a tough question to answer. We've approved quite a few number of garden suites, but Mr. Bruder, go ahead.
I can certainly try, Mr. Chair. So it is a little bit of a tough question to answer, and I don't think I could give a specific number. I would generally comment, though, that there were definitely a handful that I can think of off the top of my head that probably wouldn't have went through in the form that they did with these updated provisions. But I think, you know, probably the majority, as in more than half of what I've seen, still would have went through. There still were a lot that would have complied. So I don't know if that helps. I don't have an exact number in terms of what would and what wouldn't. But like I say, I think overall the majority still would have met the most of the intent of what we're bringing forward here, but there definitely were a handful that wouldn't.
And I appreciate that response, and I wasn't looking for a specific number. I just think it's really important, in my humble opinion, that as a council, that we have a criteria, we have a template that we are looking at when these applications come through, so that it's not an arbitrary decision that we're just, you know, picking a number and saying yes, and we really don't have a template or a checkbox to go through. And I think these amendments are needed, are required, and I appreciate the work that staff has done to get us to this point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brunei. I agree. We're working on the gray areas and trying to get them more black and whites. So Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I am very pleased to see this report tonight. And I do think that we were very much working by the seat of our pants, so to speak, with all of the applications that came forward, and that this proposed set of guidelines and then proposed bylaw does set it up very clearly as to what is and is not a garden suite. So I think it takes a certain amount of interpretation that we were forced into, and this is no fault of any of the staff. It was a provincial initiative that came at us, and the garden suite started to roll in. So I would commend the staff for moving as quickly as they did to get to where we are here tonight. I would also commend the staff on the way the report was set up. I really appreciate bringing in the public in the way you have done it here in the report, and the feedback that we received in the open session, and analyzing each one of those comments within the proposed bylaw. So, I think it's great work, and I think it will certainly guide us in assessing future garden suites. My question is along the lines of the I guess the tracking of garden suites, and anytime you set a life expectancy, so to speak, of anything, you're gonna need to follow up on it. We're gonna need to track it, and what was particularly interesting for me was in the report on page 3 of 6 at the bottom, when you were explaining the difference between the garden suites and the accessory apartment dwelling units. There's a comment that says a garden suite must be used by only a specified occupant or occupants, meaning that once the person who occupies the garden suite no longer requires the unit, the suite must be removed. So, that would tell me that, I think Councillor Timmer's question is valid in that, hey, if everything's going along nicely at 20 years, what do we do? I think that's a valid question. I also think it's a valid question that if prior to 20 years, something changes, and whether there be a move of that particular family member into a retirement home, or, God forbid, somebody passes on, how do we check in with that unit on a regular basis to assess, the occupants being those that were originally signed to the bylaw or the document? Through you, Mr. Chair, maybe to Mr. Bruder.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So the way it happens is we're supposed to get written confirmation of the occupants every December. That's usually how it goes for these. We do keep track of them. Right now, admittingly, it's fairly rudimentary how we do so, but we do have an ongoing table of the properties by location and by file number. So we make sure that we're keeping track of those. And I think, it's important to note why we have to do that too. And to your point is, we have to make sure we know what's going on there to some degree as well, which is why we ask for written confirmation, because, we need to be able to control. These uses are meant for, family succession, aging parents or family members in need, what have you. And the last thing we need is for some of these to be, converted to something like an Airbnb or some type of other use that really isn't with the intention. So we do typically require some follow-up with the residents, with the occupants in there. But that would continue obviously with the new regulation.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to follow up to Mr. Bruder. So would it be would it be sort of best practice if we were to include that or something to that effect in the bylaw, so that all participants going in know the process and know how we're going to enforce what we are writing into our bylaw. And I'm thinking that I don't want to make this an onerous project, or we've got a half-time person tracking these regularly. There should be some way that we can set it up that there is an annual confirmation that's done, so that we can continue to support that couple or that whoever might be in that situation or in that garden suite, and it's not perceived as you're checking up on me.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, that's a good question for sure. How we structure it now is a clause that annual touch point of the occupants in the temporary use agreement that gets registered. So we do include it in there, but in terms of in the bylaw itself, that's interesting. I'm not sure if it's been done before, not to say it can't happen, but definitely something we can look at to try to strengthen that piece for sure.
Okay, thank you, Matt, for that. And again, very pleased to see this, and I think it does make everything very, very clear to everybody as to what is and is not a garden suite, and all of the planning around a garden suite. So thank you for the report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Pachariva.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Mikulak. And now that we've refined the definition of these garden suites, I think it's important that we need to depoliticize the whole issue. Like many items that come before us, we need to always look at streamlining and make it easier for those that are seeking different housing types. So I would ask Mr. Bruder, when this comes back, could staff consider what a delegated authority on this looks like, and have it as part of the report, and get your thoughts on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, certainly we can look at that and how that's structured. We have seen, I think, in a couple other municipalities where they've done so. It's the same kind of idea. Haldimand County, for example, does that for theirs. So they get their policies to the point where everybody's on board, they're updated, and then they go through and pass it as delegated authority that's delegated to staff for approval, very similar to how a site plan works. So
Yeah.
Just in terms, while I'm at it, just to kind of outline some of the next steps here. So these draft changes that we're proposing, they take the form of zoning amendment and official plan amendment, as if it was a planning application, but it's one the town has initiated. So, the next steps are to hold a public meeting and then bring forward for recommendations. So plenty of time to look into that further, and happy to do so.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Mayor Easton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased that Councillor Pachariva brought up that point. I had a conversation with the CAO a few months ago about the features of a delegated authority. When it came to my attention that there was actually a bias, not from the council, but bias from some comments that were coming from the community. And so I think that the discussion that we've had tonight and this report, it clearly defines and it lays out the terms and the conditions. And this is not any different in my mind than the road allowance situation, where we finally got to the point where we defined it to the nth degree and then said to staff, you administer this and bring us a report annually on what the process and the applications that have come forward. I think it's fair, and I think it's going to be a way of responding to any perceived slowness that any kind of a process involved. So I think it will take red tape out of it, and we can easily monitor that. So I'll look forward to hearing these comments. I guess I think at this point, maybe since we're talking about an administrative matter, Mr. Chairman, we should have some comment from the CAO on this, if we can.
CAO, you've been asked to say a few words.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think to the mayor's comments and Director Bruder really hit on all those points. When this was brought up a number of months ago, I think we did do some research at that time. There are a number of municipalities that have this item as well as other items from a planning perspective as delegated authority. And so I think when we come back, we can definitely look at that. I think where we want to ensure we have a very robust conversation is in the formulation of the policy like we are now. So I think when we do bring back a final report, hearing some of the comments this evening, I think we'll try to incorporate all those, have that dialogue. And like with a number of things, planning staff have both a dedicated role, but also legislative responsibilities from the perspective of, looking at policies like this and decisions. So absolutely something we can bring back.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mayor Easton. There being no further discussion, we have a motion. Devan, would you please read the motion?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. The motion is that council receive for information report PD 5321 regarding an update to the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications for garden suites in the name of the town of Lincoln, and that a recommendation report be prepared once all public and agency comments have been received and identified issues and concerns have been addressed. And with that, I will ask for a mover, please. Thank you, Councillor Pachariba and Councillor Bernay.
Yes.
Councillor McPherson,
Yes.
Chair Micklick,
Yes.
Councillor Pachariba,
Yes.
Councillor Reimer,
Yes.
Councillor Timmers,
Yes.
Councillor Regima,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Russell,
Yes.
Mayor Easton.
Support.
Thank you. That carries, Chair.
Thank you. Reports. There being no reports to consider for the Planning and Economic Development Committee agenda, we have now concluded the Planning and Economic Development Committee agenda. We will now rotate and allow Councillor Chair Paul McPherson to assume the chair at this time for the General Business and Finance Committee agenda. However, before we do that, I just have a few words I'd like to say for myself. I'd like to go off script a bit here and take the opportunity to say that it's been a real privilege and an honor to have been able to serve as your chair this past year. Believe it or not, I've never chaired formal meetings such as these prior to my being elected to council, and can say that I've thoroughly enjoyed this opportunity and experience. Our CAO has sourced some terrific talent, as I've always been able to look forward to the next meeting or challenge we would face as a committee, perhaps because of the assistance and support of our supportive clerks, Julie Kirklos and Devan Kripp. They're always trying to ensure that I'm prepared for each meeting prior to, and that I'm on task during, all while performing their duties as clerks. I've always been amazed with their ability to multitask. I appreciate our Director of Planning, Matt Bruder, and Director of ECDev, Paul Deaney, for always taking the time to discuss their thoughts and opinions on various planning and economic development subjects. Their knowledge and passion within their fields is always evident during the meetings, and if an answer wasn't immediately available, they take no time to research it and circle back with one. Finally, I appreciate my fellow members of council for their patience during what could be some pretty lengthy meetings that we've had, given the complex and challenging items we've been involved with this past year. The easy thing to do for us would be to show up, go through the agenda, vote yes, and hope dinner might still be warm. What I'm appreciating and I'm always impressed with is our council's effort when reading the reports and agendas, some almost 800 pages, while engaging with members of the community when preparing ourselves for upcoming meetings. For me, it's always been interesting hearing the questions asked and the opinions voiced from the different lenses we have in the room or on computer other than my own. Finally, and to keep this as brief as possible, I look forward to working and supporting our incoming chair, Chair Brunet, as your vice chair in the new year as we continue our effort to navigate the town of Lincoln forward in the active and planning days ahead. Thank you very much. Councillor McPherson, you're up.
Very well said, Chair Mikulik, and I applaud you for a job very well done this past year. Moving to General Business and Finance Committee, there are no registered delegations and there are no consent agenda items for this evening's General Business and Finance Committee agenda. We now move to reports. We will now consider item 7.3.1, Downtown Bench, Beamsville Business Improvement Area, 2022 Budget and Levy, Report AD-30-21. Prior to the presentation, I will ask our Director of Economic Development and Communications to provide introductory remarks. Paul, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair McPherson. Actually, I'm going to turn over to Stephanie Hicks from the BIA to do her presentation. I'm happy to answer some questions and comments to the report after the fact. I know Stephanie and Chair Darchie have a wonderful presentation put forward talking about the wonderful work the BIA has done in 2021 and outlook for 2022. So without further ado, over to her, Chair.
And so just so we all know, and no introductions required, but we now have Stephanie Hicks, our Executive Director, and Ray Darchie, the Chair of the Downtown Bench Beamsville Business Improvement Area. Please proceed with your presentation.
Hi there, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for inviting us to address council tonight. I'm just preluding Stephanie's address. This will be my last year as the chair of the BIA. I will remain with the BIA and work with them. I will be in the position of a past chair. I just wanted to take this opportunity to publicly thank you for all your dedicated support of the BIA during my tenure. When Councillor Patriba approached me almost 6 years ago to join the BIA, I learned quickly that we had many challenges to address as an organization, as well as an imperative need to revitalize our relationship with the town, our membership in the community. During my tenure, I've been blessed with an enthusiastic, creative board of directors and downtown business membership. Their support is essential to our ability to achieve our goals as an organization. As well, integral to our success was the trust and support of Mayor Easton, Town Council, especially our rep on Councilor McPherson, and the town staff, who all saw our vision for the downtown and provided unwavering support for our organizational goals. Our relationship with the town council is special. After attending the Ontario Downtown Business Association conferences this summer in Hamilton, I learned how special it is. It is not a very common relationship where it's so synergistic and where we work so well together. It was because of this relationship we were able to bring on our executive director, Stephanie Hicks, who has helped take the Downtown Beamsville Bench BIA to levels I couldn't only imagine when I began this 6 years ago. I sincerely, personally thank her for her monumental efforts and support. She made my job very easy. It has been my honor and pleasure to serve the community these past 6 years. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to work with you for the betterment of our downtown and our community. I think this is only the beginning of our journey, and I look forward to an even bigger and better future for our downtown and our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Darchie. Very, very well put. And we'll move now to Stephanie Hicks for the presentation.
Thank you very
Thank you. Questions after that.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Councillor McPherson. And thank you to staff and council for allowing us to be here. It's very important for us and our members in the community that we are able to present what we have completed in a year as well. It's a great way to end our year. So I'm going to jump right into the presentation and try and follow our incredible chair, Ray Darchie, in his words. So next slide, please. This was supposed to be on the screen as Ray Darchie gave his wonderful, wonderful speech. That was at an event that he attended this year. So I won't keep it on this slide, but great photo of Ray. Next slide, please. So jumping right into our mandate, there's 6 key functions that we must address as a BIA. And the first one that we did for the year 2021, this is what we covered under governance. So we did implement performance reviews. We formed an executive of the board. We approved our 2022 budget. And what is missing actually from this slide is we filled our vacancies on our boards. We have a full slate of officers. We have a full roster of 9 board members, which is fantastic. Next slide, please. Beautification is a huge part of our mandate. The next couple of slides will go over the beautification that we've done in the downtown. Our Barrels Bloom program, we added 10 more barrels to the program. We did partner with the Jacob Senior Living to paint these barrels. I have to tell you, these seniors were incredible to work with and amazing artists. So we implemented in total 30 barrels bloom into the downtown. In addition to that, we had 5 oversized planters, 23 railing garden boxes, a hillside logo garden bed, and 168 hanging flower baskets that are all within downtown. That is a joint effort with the town of Lincoln. And out right now, lining our sidewalks is our winter greenery. We have 50 urns and 5 oversized planters. Next slide, please. Here's just a fun, vibrant picture of some of the beautification that you may have seen when walking the streets of downtown. Next slide, please. For Canada Day, we decided to decorate the downtown in red and white. We did some lawn signage, some flags in our planters on the hillside. We had a big Happy Canada Day photo op, and we lined the trees with 250 tiny little maple leaf flags. So our downtown was looking quite festive. And throughout the year, we tend to do a lot of community chalkboard messages. So here's just 3 that I decided to highlight for you to see. Next slide, please. With the pandemic still being in the forefront early in the year, we had to shift the way that we were doing events. So what we did was implemented 3 fun-filled packages where we sold 50 of each package, and they sold for $50 to the community. They sold out super fast. They were loaded with great, food, usually an activity, and they were all kind of themed to the holiday. It was great for our members. It was great for the community. And we couldn't have done that without the Town of Lincoln staff helping us with the booking system. So that was definitely a win for us in way of putting on events this year. Next slide, please. We launched the Downtown 5K. This was a race at your own pace 5K. It's actually still going on. There's no date on those beautiful medals, which I know all counselors have received. So I look forward to seeing your photos. I know there's some here that have completed the 5K, but this particular event did exactly what it was supposed to do. It got people into our downtown, and quite often they would send us photos, and we asked them to tell us what they experienced, did while they were in the downtown. Many of them opted to go for lunch afterwards, pop into Conversations Cafe, go to the library. Many of them toured around the skate park because that was new for them to explore. So this was a great little initiative to get people into our downtown. Next slide, please. And then we specifically partnered with Great Lakes Christian High School to do Downtown 5K. This happened in early October. It was wonderful for the students to participate because they're new to the downtown, and downtown is actually their home for their duration of school while they're here. So it was a great opportunity for them to get out and explore. They had a mapped out route of things that they needed to go check out in downtown. It was a really fun activity for us to do. Next slide, please. And we collaborated with the Lincoln Public Library a lot this year. We did a downtown story walk in the Kingsway Plaza. We were the title sponsor of their summer reading challenge, and Rosie, their little outreach van, did do some outreach into our downtown. Next slide, please. The Pick a Path Pumpkin Adventure was the first time we, with restrictions opening up, we were able to put on an in-person outdoor event. So this was 12 selected locations within the downtown that we had people in costume posted at these locations, and community members pre-registered for this event. They would travel to the 12 locations to earn clues about who stole the missing candy. Next slide, please. This is a shot of some of the in front of the businesses that participated and our people that we had in costume giving out the clues. In the middle there, you'll see we had 2 huge pumpkin decals on the sidewalk. One was on Beam Street and one was at the Plumbing Center. And when families that participated stood on those pumpkin decals, Niagara Dance and Fitness Studio would come out and do a flash mob 1-minute dance and then provide the clue. Next slide, please. And included with their swag bag and free pumpkin, there is an opportunity to do a photo shoot with Flora Ellen Photography, which is a downtown member. And these were free photos that families got. So this is just highlighting some of the happy faces and costumes. Next slide, please. One of the marketing campaigns that we ran was the I Believe campaign. This was run with the Ontario BIA Association across the 300, there's about 300 BIAs in Ontario. So this was a campaign where we solicited asked our board members to tell us what they believed in downtown, and we promoted it through social media. Next slide, please. I just have to give each board member their time because the messages that they each had were very good. Next slide, please. This was another marketing campaign. It was, paying tribute to back in the day, the Rosie the Riveter We Can Do It campaign, and this with the Ontario BIA Association as well, for a rapid, responsible reopening once vaccinations started happening. We needed to do what we could to rapidly and responsibly reopen our downtowns. These campaigns are near and dear to me, as I am the chair of the communications committee for the Ontario BIA Association. So it is an honor to launch these campaigns across Ontario and know that we are doing a huge guerrilla campaign messaging with them. Next slide, please. Throughout the year, we also did several shop local posts, Be Kind posts, and we celebrated small business. Next slide. One of the campaigns happening at this current time is Your Hometown Holiday. This is a partnership with the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce and Lincoln. This is the opportunity for people to shop local and their chance to win some cool prizes to continue to shop local. One of the greatest things about this campaign, so not only for the customer, getting the foot traffic in the door, but there was also 3 marketing sessions that were held for businesses. These were specific to digital marketing. I know that we did have a lot of uptake in the downtown businesses participating in these. They were posting us on social media, including us in their story, and reached out and said that it definitely changed the way that they are going to do social media moving forward and how they really dissected their own digital presence. So that was a great benefit to our members to participate in that at no cost. Next slide. And currently running right now is the Niagara Region Winter Wonderland. This is on Goose Chase. We've partnered with Niagara Region, and there's 8 BIAs participating in this. There's no to participate. The goal is just to get people to travel to the downtowns and follow. Once you load the downtowns on the app, you just take pictures of what it asks you to. For example, in our downtown, the Snowman Selfie Station, as well as the alleyway, are key points that you upload photos showing that you were there. You earn points, and then there are the grand prize there is $1,000 as well. There's quite a few prizes there, but the grand prize is $1,000. Next slide, please. Meet Link. I don't know who's been following our resident elf on the shelf that we've coined to be our elf on the bench, but this is Link. He is a very popular, very, very busy elf doing a large tour of downtown. He is scheduled to be total in about 30 businesses up until the 24th when he heads back to the North Pole. And the community has just embraced him with open arms on social media, right down to his name. That was the most popular name suggestion by the community, was to name him Link after the town of Lincoln. So there's definitely some community pride there. Next slide. And once again, we did participate in the Community Care of West Niagara Christmas Hamper Program and Angel Wish Program. We were able to sponsor 10 families. So this was the BIA and our levy dollars, as well as some additional help from August Restaurant Smoke and Moonshine, Paul Max Pets, and Dean's No Frills. Next slide. Other accomplishments that we have done, we've received over $100,000 in grant revenues this year. We received an award from the Ontario Business Improvement Area Association. We became an official Bee City with Bee City Canada, and I am honored to be a stakeholder on the truck traffic bypass meetings. And I'm so grateful and thankful, as are the members, that this is being discussed and addressed. As we all know, truck traffic is near and dear to our hearts, and definitely a conversation that continues. And we really, really appreciate the town's support on that. Next slide. Our 2022 budget was presented to our membership at our AGM on November 18th, where it did pass. And we're happy to say that we did not increase the levy for the 2022 year at all. Next slide. In the forecast, we have 50 planters coming to the downtown. These will be permanent planters that stay out 365 days a year. They will be planted with, you know, beautiful flowers for the spring, summer season, mums for the fall season, and winter greenery. It's a great way to give us some height to our streetscaping. You know, right now we have some wonderful Christmas urns that are in the downtown, but they are quite low to the downtown. So thanks to a wonderful grant, we were able to secure 50 planters that will be coming in spring of 2020. Our alleyway 2.0 grand opening will be scheduled hopefully for end of May. Big benches on the bench, and the alleyway and the big benches, you know, we are very resilient and persistent. So these were on our radar at the end of last year, and we've had our fair share of delays with COVID. So they still remain on our radar and will continue to just be there until they happen. We do definitely have more beautification coming to the downtown. We are going to undergo a strategic plan with our full board, and we are going to launch specific committees that not only have a resident board member chairing them, but also other businesses that aren't necessarily a part of the board having a seat on those committees. Next slide, please. I did want to take this moment to thank what we called our community heroes. There was a group of businesses there that you see on the right that in addition to our levy, stepped up to the plate and sponsored some very specific events that happened in our downtown this year. So we're very grateful and thankful for them for that. Next slide. And of course, thank you to the town of Lincoln. Every department, you know, I can't do the same delivery that Dr. Ray Darchie did as far as the town support that we receive, but it is very, very true. Everyone from our wonderful PAO to directors Deanne and McKay and their prospective staff members, the support is unreal, and we really, really appreciate it, and we're very grateful for that. Next slide, please. This is just if you want to get in touch with us, but most people definitely know how to hunt us down, and that's a wonderful thing. Next slide. And this is just my question slide, but I needed to figure out a way to get these 4 pup pics into the presentation. So I put it here.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie, and to Ray, and I'm just going to put it straight out to the council. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Timmers.
Thank you, Chair McPherson. Well, I certainly don't have any questions, but I just would like to say a couple of comments. I want to thank Ray for his 6 years of work. And Stephanie, you are just, I've told you this before, you are just a rock star. And I'm just so impressed. And when I look back 6 years ago, 7 years ago, you know, I never could have imagined how beautiful the downtown can look and all of the amazing activities. And it's just so creative all the time, so engaging. I love following Link. I love following all of your things that you do through the BIA. But anyway, that's all. I just had to say thank you to both of you and to Councillor McPherson. You know, you've all worked so hard, and it certainly shows. You should be really proud of your accomplishments. But thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Counselor.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions? See none, I too would.
Oh, I see Mayor's.
We have Mary Easton. Go ahead, Mary Easton.
It just doesn't seem to be enough, you just feel like you want to be so effusive about what's happened here, Mr. Chairman. And since you chair this committee, I'm just wondering if there isn't more that we can do. I think we've set quite an example. First of all, you really know you're going to be successful when you have the right chair and when you hire the right people. And we've had that. We've had excellent counselor involvement and commitment for years. Two good, strong counselors. Maybe Councillor McMillan was involved at one point, I've forgotten. I know there's been a lot of disappointments over the years, but these past 5-6 years have been something else. The town made a major investment. It's not the fact that we made the investment, it's the return on investment. And I don't think we have any idea what that represents. And I don't know, Mr. Chairman, whether you've thought about that and had some ideas, or Mr. Deanne, whether you've thought about it. We don't even need to talk about it tonight, but it seems to me there are many things that you can't evaluate. But this one, I believe, has real tangibles in so many different areas. And I just want to give that a little bit of airtime and see where it might go. And I'm quite happy for it to be discussed at a later date, because it is a really superb example, I think, of taking a little risk and having a lot of faith and then taking all the right steps. So I don't know, Mr. Chair, I'm going to give it to you and then see where it goes. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. And, I absolutely agree. Chair Ray made comment about the early days of the last term and really starting pretty much from ground zero, and with the assistance of Council Pachariba, tapping Ray on the shoulder and saying, hey, maybe this is something that we can get together on. And I'll tell you, from that point, through a couple of tough years and some a slow start, we gained a lot of momentum. We learned a lot in those early couple of years, and then bringing Stephanie on board, obviously, with the enthusiasm, with the creativity, with the kind of the stay with it, the stay, keep these, as she mentioned, keep these items on our agenda every month. We review them, and I'm very confident that entire list will happen. So. Looking at where we're at today, I know, I also attended the OBIA conference, and just in talking to some of the other executive directors, this group, this board, and certainly Stephanie leading the charge, is the envy of many BIAs across Ontario. So it is something that we absolutely should celebrate, and we should probably somehow document what we're doing here and how it's working. So I take that as maybe a something that we can take back to the board and maybe discuss it a little further, because there is a transformation that has happened, and I think that certainly the residents know it, have felt it, and I would say, again, Stephanie makes a presentation tonight that is during a pandemic year, and just the items that are coming at us during a difficult, challenging year. There's no quit. There's just continues to create ideas, throw things at us at the board, and many times it sticks, and many times, like Link the elf,
it's a hit. So thank you for that comment, Mary Easton, and I think we'll take that back to the board. So
Thank you very much.
in agreement, Stephanie and Ray?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And I would just briefly add that, appreciate Ray and your comments. We've been fortunate to have, Ray as our chair over this 5, 6, 7 years. I guess it's 7 years now.
7 years, well.
And that Ray is all in all the time and has really been one that has just rolls up his sleeves. You saw him, in the picture from the Great Lakes School, and that's been the type of leadership that he's exemplified throughout the 7 years. That it's like, you need help, I'm there. And this was happening when he was working as well, not just because he's retired. He was there every step of the way. And we haven't lost Ray yet. Ray will continue on for the rest of the term, and then we'll take on the position of past chair. So we're going to have his input, and I don't know if it's public yet, Stephanie, as to who will take over chair, or if we need to keep that to ourselves right now. I'll leave that to you to speak to that. But those are my comments.
Thank you.
Through you, Chair, we will have to have an election for the executive seats at our AGM.
Okay, good thing I didn't spout that out. All right, so we have a report that we will go to for any kind of motion.
Through you, Chair, before we do that, I'd ask that council extends the meeting beyond 10 o'clock until the agenda is completed, now that we've reached 10 o'clock.
Okay, so do we want to put that to a vote?
I would please, and if I could have a mover to extend the meeting beyond 10. Thank you, Councillor Reimer and Councillor Brunet.
Yes.
Councillor McPherson,
Yes.
Councillor Mikulek,
Yes.
Councillor Katarina,
Yes.
Councillor Reimer,
Yes.
and Councillor Chambers,
Yes.
Councillor Regima,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Russell,
Yes.
and Mayor Easton.
Support.
Thank you. That carries, Chair.
So Devan, I see the motion here in the script. So
Correct.
do we want to go to a report on it first for questions and then go to the motion? Okay.
That's correct, Chair. The presentation was associated with the report, so that would be
Okay.
great. Thank you.
Any questions to the report? Seeing none, there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Russell that council endorse the 2022 operating budget for the Beamsville Downtown Business Improvement Area attached as Appendix A to report AD-30-21 in the amount of $113,000, and that the levy portion of the operating budget for the Beamsville Downtown Business Improvement Area in the amount of $93,000 be approved, and that the treasurer be hereby authorized and directed to make arrangements to levy an amount of $93,000 against ratable properties in the Beamsville Downtown Business Improvement Area pursuant to Section 208 of the Municipal Act 2001 and Town of Lincoln Bylaw number 2019-16 to levy the 2022 budget as referenced above, and that the schedule of payments for 2022 be in accordance with Town of Lincoln tax payment schedule, and that council ratify the 2022 slate of officers of the Board of Management of the Beamsville Downtown Business Improvement Area as referenced in Appendix A. I will now ask our Deputy Clerk to call the vote. Devan, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Brunet,
Yes.
Chair McPherson,
Yes.
Councillor Mikulek,
Yes.
Councillor Katarina,
Yes.
Councillor Regima,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Russell,
Yes.
Councillor Reimer,
Yes.
Counselor Timmers,
Yes.
Mayor Easton.
Support.
Thank you, Chair. That carries.
And thank you again, Stephanie and Ray.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank. There being no additional reports to consider for the General Business and Finance Committee agenda, we have now concluded the General Business and Finance Committee agenda. We will now rotate to allow Councillor and Chair J.D. Pachariva to assume the chair at this time for the Community Services and Infrastructure Development Committee agenda.
Thank you, Councilor McPherson. There are no registered delegations this evening for Community Services and Infrastructure Committee. We've got two consent agenda items tonight, so we're now considering item 8.2. The consent agenda, which is inclusive of item 8.2.1, Active Transportation Advisory Committee minutes of October 28th, 2021, and item 8.2.2, Museum Deaccession Report CS 09-21. Would any members of council like to remove these items from the consent agenda to discuss? I see there being no further discussion. I have a motion moved by Councillor Timmers. Council receive and file for information the consent agenda inclusive of items 8.2.1, Active Transportation Advisory Committee minutes of October 28, 2021, and item 8.2.2, Museum Deaccession Report CS 09-21. I will now ask our deputy clerk to call out the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Counselor Bernay,
Yes.
Counselor McPherson,
Yes.
Counselor Micklick,
Yes.
Chair Pachariva,
Yes.
Counselor Rajima,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Russell,
Yes.
Counselor Timmers,
Yes.
Counselor Reimer,
Yes.
and Mayor Easton. Thank you. That carries, Chair.
Thank you very much, Devan, and special thank you to Ms. McKay, Ms. Ain, Ms. Wilson, and Ms. Proto that stuck around. Next time, ladies, I will ask to have our item put first. There being no reports for this evening for the Community Service and Infrastructure agenda items, we have no confidential items this evening. Do we have any committee remarks? I see none. There being no further business, I call this meeting adjourned at 10:09 p.m. Thank you much. Merry Christmas.
Good night.
Good night.